Isaac Asimov was an American author and professor of biochemistry at Boston University. Best known for his works of science fiction and for his popular science books, Asimov was prolific and wrote or edited more than 500 books and an estimated 90,000 letters and postcards. His books have been published in 9 of the 10 major categories of the Dewey Decimal Classification. Asimov wrote hard science fiction and, along with Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke, he was considered one of the big three science fiction writers during his lifetime. Asimov's most famous work is the Foundation series. His other major series are the Galactic Empire series and the Robot series. The Galactic Empire novels are explicitly set in earlier history of the same fictional universe as the Foundation series. Later, beginning with Foundation's Edge, he linked this distant future to the Robot and Spacer stories, creating a unified future history for his stories much like those pioneered by Robert A. Heinlein and previously produced by Cordwainer Smith and Poul Anderson. He wrote hundreds of short stories, including the social science fiction, Nightfall, which in 1964 was voted by the Science Fiction Writers of America the best short science fiction story of all time. Asimov wrote the Lucky Star series of juvenile science fiction novels using the pen name Paul French. Asimov also wrote mysteries and fantasy, as well as much non-fiction. Most of his popular science books explain scientific concepts in a historical way, going as far back as possible to a time when the science in question was at its simplest stage. He often provides nationalities, birth dates, and death dates for the scientists he mentions, as well as etymologies and pronunciation guides for technical terms. Examples include Guide to Science, the 3-volume set Understanding Physics, and Asimov's Chronology of Science and Discovery, as well as works on astronomy, mathematics, history, William Shakespeare's writing, and chemistry. Asimov was a longtime member and vice president of Mensa International. Albeit reluctantly, he described some members of that organization as brain-proud and aggressive about their IQs. He took more joy in being president of the American Humanist Association. The asteroid 5020 Asimov, a crater on the planet Mars, a Brooklyn elementary school, and a literary award are named in his honor. Biography. Early life. Asimov was born between October 4, 1919 and January 2, 1920 in Petrovichi near Klimovichy, then Gomel Governorate in the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, to Anna Rachel and Judah Asimov, a family of Jewish millers. His exact date of birth within that range is unknown, but Asimov himself celebrated it on January 2. The family name derives from a word for winter crops in which his great-grandfather dealt. This word is spelled in Russian, and in Belarusian. Accordingly, his name originally was in Russian, however, he was later known in Russia as Isaak Asimov, a Russian Cyrillic adaptation of the American English pronunciation. Asimov had 2 younger siblings, a sister, Marcia, and a brother, Stanley, who was vice president of New York Newsday. His family immigrated to the United States when he was 3 years old. Since his parents always spoke Yiddish and English with him, he never learned Russian, but he remained fluent in Yiddish as well as English. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, Asimov taught himself to read at the age of 5, and his mother got him into first grade a year early by claiming he was born on September 7, 1919. Asimov wrote of his father, "My father, for all his education as an Orthodox Jew, was not Orthodox in his heart," noting that he didn't recite the myriad prayers prescribed for every action, and he never made any attempt to teach them to me. After becoming established in the U.S., his parents owned a succession of candy stores, in which everyone in the family was expected to work. The candy stores sold newspapers and magazines, a fact that Asimov credited as a major influence in his lifelong love of the written word, as it allowed him an unending supply of new reading material as a child that he could not have otherwise afforded. He became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1928 at the age of 8. Education and career. Asimov began reading science fiction pulp magazines at a young age. His father, as a matter of principle, forbade reading the pulps, as he considered them to be trash. But Asimov persuaded him that the science fiction magazines had "science" in the title, so they were educational. Around the age of 11, he began to write his own stories, and by age 19, after he discovered science fiction fandom, he was selling stories to the science fiction magazines. John W. Campbell, then editor of Astounding Science Fiction, had a strong formative influence on Asimov and eventually became a personal friend. Asimov attended New York City public schools, including Boys High School in Brooklyn. Graduating at 15, he went on to Seth Low Junior College, a branch of Columbia University in Brooklyn, designed to absorb some of the Jewish and Italian-American students who applied to Columbia College, then the institution's primary undergraduate school for men, with quotas on the number of admissions from those ethnic groups. Originally a zoology major, Asimov changed his subject to chemistry after his first semester as he disapproved of dissecting an alley cat. After Seth Low Junior College closed in 1938, Asimov finished his B.S. degree at University Extension in 1939. When he failed to secure admission to medical school, he applied to the graduate program in chemistry at Columbia, initially rejected and then only accepted on a probationary basis. Asimov completed his M.A. in chemistry in 1941 and earned a Ph.D. in biochemistry in 1948. In between, he spent 3 years during World War II working as a civilian at the Philadelphia Navy Yard's Naval Air Experimental Station, living in the Walnut Hill section of West Philadelphia from 1942 to 1945. In September 1945 he was drafted into the U.S. Army. If he had not had his birth date corrected, he would have been officially 26 years old and ineligible. He served for almost 9 months before receiving an honorable discharge. In the course of his brief military career, he rose to the rank of corporal on the basis of his typing skills, and narrowly avoided participating in the 1946 atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll, when a bureaucratic mix-up that caused his allotment to be stopped led to his being removed from the task force only days before it was due to sail to Bikini. After completing his doctorate, Asimov joined the faculty of the Boston University School of Medicine, with which he remained associated thereafter. From 1958, this was in a non-teaching capacity, as he turned to writing full-time. Being tenured, he retained the title of associate professor, and in 1979, the university honored his writing by promoting him to full professor of biochemistry. Asimov's personal papers from 1965 onward are archived at the university's Muger Memorial Library, to which he donated them at the request of curator Howard Gottlieb. In 1959, after a recommendation from Arthur Obermeyer, Asimov's friend and a scientist on the U.S. Missile Protection Project, Asimov was approached by DARPA to join Obermeyer's team. Asimov declined, on the grounds that his ability to write freely would be impaired should he receive classified information. However, he did submit a paper to DARPA titled "On Creativity," containing ideas on how government-based science projects could encourage team members to think more creatively. Personal life. Asimov married Gertrude Blugerman on July 26, 1942. After the wedding, the couple lived in an apartment in West Philadelphia, as Asimov was then employed at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. They moved to Boston in 1949 and had 2 children, David and Robert Joan. In 1970, they separated and Asimov moved back to New York, this time to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where he lived for the rest of his life. He immediately began seeing Janet O. Jepson, and married her 2 weeks after his divorce from Gertrude in 1973. Asimov was a claustrophile. He enjoyed small, enclosed spaces. In the third volume of his autobiography, he recalls a childhood desire to own a magazine stand in a New York City subway station, within which he could enclose himself and listen to the rumble of passing trains while reading. Asimov was afraid of flying, only doing so twice in his entire life. Consequently, he seldom traveled great distances. This phobia influenced several of his fiction works, such as the Wendell Earth mystery stories and the robot novels featuring Elijah Baley. In his later years, Asimov found enjoyment traveling on cruise ships. On several cruises he was part of the entertainment program, giving science-themed talks aboard ships such as the RMS Queen Elizabeth II. Asimov was an able public speaker and was a frequent fixture at science fiction conventions, where he was friendly and approachable. He patiently answered tens of thousands of questions and other mail with postcards, and was pleased to give autographs. He was of medium height, stocky, with mutton chop whiskers, and a distinct New York accent. His physical dexterity was very poor. He never learned to swim or ride a bicycle. However, he did learn to drive a car after he moved to Boston. In his humor book Asimov Laughs Again, he describes Boston driving as anarchy on wheels. Asimov's wide interests included his participation in his later years in organizations devoted to the comic operas of Gilbert and Sullivan, and in the Wolf Pack, a group of devotees of the Nero Wolfe mysteries written by Rex Stout. Many of his short stories mention or quote Gilbert and Sullivan. He was a prominent member of the Baker Street Irregulars, the leading Sherlock Holmes society, for whom he wrote an essay arguing that Professor Moriarty's work, The Dynamics of an Asteroid, involved the willful destruction of an ancient, civilized planet. He was also a member of the all-male literary banqueting club, the Trapdoor Spiders, which served as the basis of his fictional group of mystery solvers, the Black Widowers. He later used his essay on Moriarty's work as the basis for a Black Widowers story, The Ultimate Crime, which appeared in More Tales of the Black Widowers. In 1984, the American Humanist Association named him the Humanist of the Year. He was one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto. From 1985 until his death in 1992, he served as president of the ʻaɪzᵻk, an honorary appointment. His successor was his friend and fellow writer Kurt Vonnegut, Jr. He was also a close friend of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, and earned a Screen Creditors Special Science Consultant on Star Trek, the motion picture, for advice he gave during production. Asimov was a founding member of the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal and is listed in its pantheon of skeptics. Asimov described Carl Sagan as one of only two people he ever met whose intellect surpassed his own. The other, he claimed, was the computer scientist and artificial intelligence expert Marvin Minsky. Illness and death. Asimov suffered a heart attack in 1977, and had triple bypass surgery in December 1983. When he died in New York City on April 6, 1992, his brother Stanley reported heart and kidney failure as the cause of death. He was survived by his second wife, Janet, and his children from his first marriage. 10 years after his death, Janet Asimov's edition of Asimov's autobiography, It's Been a Good Life, revealed that the myocardial and renal complications were the result of an infection by HIV, which he had contracted from a blood transfusion received during his bypass operation. Janet Asimov wrote in the epilogue of It's Been a Good Life that Asimov's physicians advised him against going public, warning that the anti-AIDS prejudice would likely extend to his family members. Asimov's family considered disclosing his condition just after his death, but the controversy that erupted the same year when Arthur Ashe announced his own HIV infection convinced them otherwise. 10 years later, after most of Asimov's physicians had died, Janet and Robin Asimov agreed that the HIV story should be made public. Awards: Damon Knight Memorial Grandmaster Award 1987, Nebula Award for Best Novelette 1977, The Bicentennial Man, Hugo Award for Best Related Work 1995, ʻAɪzᵻmʒv, Edward D. Smith Memorial Award 1967, Locus Award for Best Short Story 1987, Robot Dreams, Locus Award for Best Science Fiction Novel 1983, Foundation's Edge, Klumpke Roberts Award 1975, Locus Award for Best Novel 1973, The Gods Themselves, Retro, Hugo Award for Best Novel 1996, The Mule,